A team of medical specialists rushed across the room, working frantically to save the patient, the beloved daughter of the renowned businessman Jonathan Miller. Evelyn Miller had fallen from her residential building and was hospitalized in a critical state. She was virtually lifeless, her body battered from the impact, a severe head injury causing a rapid loss of blood. Despite the doctor's best efforts, she remained unresponsive to treatment. As the medical team struggled to revive Evelyn, her soul drifted away from her body. "Where am I?" Evelyn murmured, glancing around the unfamiliar space before her gaze landed on the motionless form lying on the hospital bed. It took her a moment to recognize herself. Panic surged through her as she rushed toward the doctor administering CPR. "Please don't stop. Don't give up on me," she pleaded, her voice desperate. But no one heard her. No one saw her. They weren't God, and they couldn't bring back the dead. "No. I can't die. I won't let them relish in my death." Her voice trembled as images of betrayal flashed before her eyes, the cruel smirk on Tiffany's face as she shoved her off the balcony, and the cold, detached stare of her husband, Gabriel, as he stood by and did nothing. It was then that the horrifying truth struck her. Her so-called best friend and the man she had loved since childhood had conspired to kill her. Evelyn had always dreamed of marrying Gabriel, despite the rumors that his heart belonged to another. She had ignored the whispers, convinced herself they were false, and pursued him anyway. But one night changed everything. A reckless encounter led to a forced marriage, orchestrated by her father, Jonathan, who compelled Gabriel to take responsibility. Gabriel resented her for it. He never wanted the marriage, never hid his disdain. But he had no choice. His father, Richard Winston, had been Jonathan's closest friend and held Evelyn in high regard. For years, Evelyn had tried to win Gabriel's affection. She endured his indifference, clung to the rare moments when she thought his icy exterior was thawing. And then, after 3 years of a loveless marriage, she had conceived his child. She had believed, naively, that the baby would change things. That Gabriel would finally look at her as more than an obligation. But now, everything was gone, her life, her child, and the last shred of hope she had clung to. And the ones responsible were the very people she had trusted the most. Evelyn wept as she stood beside her lifeless body, watching the last light fade from the room. "If I had another chance, I would never let them destroy me." A single tear slid down her cheek as darkness consumed her. "Wake up, young miss. You're going to be late for class." Evelyn jolted awake, her heart pounding. The voice was familiar, painfully so. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned, her wide eyes landing on Susan, her nanny. Impossible. Evelyn's fingers clenched the sheets. Her surroundings were unmistakably familiar. She was in her childhood bedroom. "How?" she whispered. "If you're feeling unwell, I should inform Master," Susan said, her expression etched with concern. She reached out to check Evelyn's forehead, startling her with the touch. Evelyn sucked in a sharp breath. She was alive. Not just alive, she was young again. Her pulse thundered as realization dawned. She had been reborn. "I'm fine," Evelyn said hastily, grabbing Susan's wrist before she could leave. "It was just a nightmare, nothing more." Susan eyed her skeptically but nodded. As soon as the door shut, Evelyn pressed a trembling hand against her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. A second chance. God had granted her a second chance. This time, she wouldn't be a fool blinded by love. Throwing off the covers, she rushed to the bathroom, glancing at the calendar on the wall. The year. The date. Everything aligned with her past life. She was 20 again. Freshly enrolled in Aspen College, working toward her master's in finance, right before the chain of events that would eventually lead to her downfall. Evelyn's chest tightened. Jonathan. Her father had loved her dearly. What would he have done if he had found out about her death? The mere thought made her stomach twist. She descended the stairs to find him at the breakfast table, scanning the headlines of the newspaper. For a moment, she simply watched him. The strong man who had always shielded her. The father who had unknowingly pushed her into the arms of a man who never wanted her. Eve? His deep voice jolted her from her thoughts. Without hesitation, Evelyn rushed to him, wrapping her arms tightly around his frame. Jonathan stiffened before exhaling with a chuckle. What's this? You're usually not this affectionate so early in the morning. Evelyn clung to him, savoring the warmth of his embrace. Are you sure you're all right? Susan said you looked unwell, he continued, his tone laced with concern. She quickly stepped back. I'm fine. It was just a bad dream. Jonathan studied her, but when she offered no further explanation, he let it slide. She couldn't tell him the truth. No one would believe her. After finishing breakfast, Evelyn left for Aspen College, her emotions a tangled mess. Seeing herself return to college felt surreal. The towering gates of Aspen loomed ahead, the car rolling to a stop in front of the grand building. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out. Eve. Evelyn stiffened at the all-too-familiar voice. Speak of the devil. She turned, masking her distaste behind a carefully controlled smile as Tiffany approached her, feigning innocence. Why didn't you pick me up today? I waited for you at the bus stop, Tiffany whined, standing before her with a pout. Evelyn resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Tiffany had always latched onto her, using their friendship to climb Aspen's social ladder. Evelyn had never realized how deep her deception ran, until it was too late. I forgot to tell you, Evelyn said smoothly. My car broke down. I had to wait for another one to pick me up. Tiffany huffed. You could have at least called. I had to take the bus. Evelyn's lips twitched. It must have been nostalgic for you. After all, you took the bus for years before we met. Tiffany's expression faltered. Suppressing her amusement, Evelyn added, Anyway, I have something to do before class. Go ahead without me. Before Tiffany could protest, Evelyn walked away. She had no intention of playing the fool this time. Deep in thought, she rounded a corner, only to collide with a firm chest. She stumbled back, steadying herself as she looked up. And her breath hitched. Gabriel. The man who had once been her world, only to become her executioner. But this time, things would be different. This time, she would be the one in control. Evelyn's eyes widened at the sight of the boy in front of her. It was Gabriel Winston, Aspen College's attractive and popular hunk. Gabriel was in his final year of a master's degree program and was about to graduate and join his family firm if Evelyn remembered correctly. Watch where you are heading to. Her expression went cold as Gabriel's arrogant voice jolted her out of her daydream. Everyone at the college knew Evelyn had feelings for Gabriel, but she never voiced them to him. Perhaps she was shy, despite the fact that they had known one another since they were children. This also applies to you. You could have changed your route after seeing me, Evelyn said with scorn, backing away from him. Evelyn had vowed to confront anyone who disparaged her and shun those who ruined her life. Her audacity shocked Gabriel, but before he could respond, Evelyn turned around and left, leaving him in the spacious foyer. What exactly did I see? Did Evelyn scold Gabriel? A student walking by mumbled. Whoa, I never thought Evelyn would be so harsh, exclaimed the other student. Isn't she cool? Another person commented. Countless murmurs emerged among the students as they observed the historic scene. Other students quickly flooded the Aspen forum with chatter as they inquired about Evelyn's bravery. Some criticize her, while others condemn her bravery. Gabriel gazed around, taking in everyone's faces, before turning and walking to the west side of the building for class. Gabriel, wait. A voice called to him, and he turned to look at the person. I apologize for Evelyn's impolite behaviors. She doesn't typically behave in such a rude manner, so I'm uncertain about her current situation. Tiffany reasoned. His stunning features captured Tiffany's attention. Tiffany secretly loved Gabriel, and in order to win his heart, she needed to become close to his childhood friend Evelyn. Gabriel glanced at the girl with a blank expression. He hummed and walked away, barely acknowledging her comments, but that brief encounter brought a proud smile to her lips. Gabriel's inadequate verbal communication skills prevented him from engaging in a conversation with her. Once she turned and walked into the classroom, satisfied. Evelyn heaved a sigh of relief as she ran towards the basin after forcing the restroom door open. During her talk with Gabriel, she realized she was holding her breath. It was surprising that she would be so cruel to the man she had committed her life to, but those events from her past would remind her of his cruelty and cause her to forget everything, including her love and devotion. She lost her affection for him the instant she saw him emotionless as she was pushed off the building. Gabriel, I used to love you wholeheartedly, but not anymore. I promised to treat you like no one else, no matter how many times we cross paths. Evelyn stood there till she relaxed. Seeing the redness in her eyes, she couldn't help but smile. Throughout your friendship, you were gullible, and the person you loved cheated you. Why are you crying for him? Don't you feel lucky to have seen their actual faces before obtaining a second chance? She reminded herself. Evelyn had always been kind and forgiving, but that changed when they took away her most valuable possession. Her fingers instinctively moved to caress her stomach. The fear of losing her child was enough to strengthen her heart and make her forget about the pain. Evelyn exited the restroom with renewed determination and made her way to class. As soon as she entered, a tremendous cheer erupted throughout the space, surprising her immediately. Despite not understanding their brief conversation, Evelyn chose to ignore it and take her seat. What have you done, Eve? Why did you offend Gabriel? Tiffany queried, anxious, as she approached Evelyn's side. Evelyn's stare was piercing the moment she noticed Tiffany in the seat next to her. If she had known what kind of girl she was, she would not have become friends with her in the first place. It wasn't my fault in the first place, and would he not just disregard me if it was? Evelyn said. Evelyn ignored her and fished the book from her backpack. Evelyn's cold words toward Gabriel surprised Tiffany, and she started to wonder what had really happened. However, you should not have addressed him rudely. How do you plan to earn his affection? Tiffany inquired with worry. Evelyn had always wanted to win Gabriel's heart, but now her indifference perplexed her. I don't care what he thinks, she abruptly responded, leaving Tiffany stunned. Tiffany recalls Gabriel never listening to anything Evelyn said, while she was the only one who attempted to acknowledge their relationship. He treated her like air, barely noticing her presence. Did she realize there was no chance Gabriel would love her? Her eyes shine with hope. Tiffany now has a method to pursue Gabriel thanks to her friend's surprising change in conduct. If she continues to mistreat Gabriel, he will despise her even more, Tiffany reasoned, a devious smirk creeping across her lips, which she hastily concealed. Tiffany's modest manner captured Evelyn's attention, prompting her to abruptly stop her thoughts by slamming the book on the table. Are you only going to talk about Gabriel? If so, please return to your seat because class is about to start. Evelyn looked ahead, ignoring Tiffany's surprised expression. Evelyn had never been so arrogant about Tiffany, but her reaction surprised her, and she returned to her seat, focusing her smug stare on her friend. Soon, the lecture began, and Evelyn returned to her studies. After her resurrection, Evelyn chose to concentrate on her academic studies instead of following Gabriel. Evelyn had tried every method to win Gabriel over in her former life, but no matter what happened, she was always the target of his fury. However, this was no longer her objective. Her desire was to fully embrace life and transform into the individual she had always aspired to be. I wasted my youth on these useless people, but no longer, Evelyn reminded herself of her life's mission while remaining focused on the class. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and Gabriel quickly picked up his backpack and walked out of the classroom. Gabby, wait. Gabriel was abruptly stopped by a voice, and he turned to see Stefan, his only friend, approaching him. What is the problem? I heard Evelyn chastise you. Has she changed her mind? Stefan smiled as he tried to pull Gabriel's leg away. Evelyn, Stefan, and Gabriel's fathers were buddies, thus, their children bonded naturally. Stefan believed Evelyn to be his sister, and Gabriel was a love interest she had been pursuing since she had known him. Evelyn developed strong affections for Gabriel, but his friend ignored her provocative conduct and treated her indifferently. Despite her best efforts, Gabriel rejected her admiration and continued to treat her like any other girl at the university. Evelyn, a year younger than them, had been obsessed with Gabriel since she was a child. She thought of Stefan as a brother, but Gabriel was just Gabby to her. She was the center of their attention, yet her sole focus was on Gabriel. Gabriel's expression darkened as his comments reminded him of the unresolved event that was spinning in his mind. Evelyn's words resonated in his eyes, and the way she stared at him with contempt fueled his rage, leading him to snatch Stefan's hand away. Gabriel didn't intend to say anything and continued walking downstairs, but as soon as he reached the first level, his eyes caught sight of Evelyn going out of her classroom, and his movements came to a standstill. He wanted to take a step forward, but when he saw Tiffany, he halted and tailed after her, eventually abandoning his goal. Gabriel went away, but Tiffany was fascinated by his presence and smirked secretly. "Why do I feel you are ignoring me?" Evelyn winced at Tiffany's touch and quickly moved away. It brought back memories of Tiffany pushing her off the balcony, which ultimately led to her death. It was as if she sensed a trigger with her fingertips. Will you please stop jumping on me?" Evelyn snapped, leaving Tiffany stunned by her harshness once more. She wasn't sure what was wrong with Evelyn. But the way Evelyn disliked her touch made her wonder if she had done anything to merit such treatment. Evelyn, on the other hand, realized she had overreacted and quickly apologized. I am sorry. I did not mean to raise my voice at you, but please stop being so pushy." "It makes me uncomfortable," Evelyn said with a false smile, devastating Tiffany with her gorgeous but harsh statements. She understood that in order to avoid Tiffany, she needed to be honest with her. Tiffany blinked in confusion and bobbled her head. Something had changed. Evelyn was never so harsh with her, she was always polite. What changed within her to cause her to act in this way? Evelyn faked a grin as she looked at Tiffany's expressionless face. "Are you going to keep staring, or do you want something from me?" she asked in the same indifferent tone. Tiffany had become extremely gluttonous, constantly begging for favors with a sorrowful grin. However, she was no longer naive, and falling for her deception was not an option. Tiffany faked a smile as she snapped out of her daze. She had no idea how to deal with this issue, but she was convinced that her tears would melt Evelyn's heart. "There is nothing. I only want to be with you. If you don't want," Tiffany intended to make a guilt trip, but Evelyn's comment caught her off guard. "I do not want to, so please excuse me," Evelyn said, walking away and leaving Tiffany behind. When she heard the student speak behind her back, her countenance changed from surprise to rage, and she walked out without paying them any attention. Evelyn marched out of the building, ignoring everyone's expressions. She was a popular student, not because she was gorgeous or the daughter of the owner, but because she excelled academically. Moreover, she stood out as the sole female who cultivated a close relationship with the two most attractive men at the college. Evelyn didn't mind being the center of attention back then, but she'd rather disappear and live a normal life now. "Hello, little sister," Evelyn flinched as Stefan unexpectedly stepped in front of her. Stefan had a habit of causing her heart palpitations. "Why has everyone been scaring me since morning?" Evelyn asked, trying to calm her pulse. Evelyn snapped while trying to ease her pulse. Ever since her encounter with Tiffany and Gabriel earlier, she felt like her life had been nothing but a pendulum, swaying back and forth. "What's up with this gloominess, and by the way, where are you heading?" Stefan asked, puzzled by Evelyn's internal monologue. Stefan inquired, perplexed by Evelyn's internal monologue. "Do you still feel offended by Gabriel?" Stefan laughed heartily, unable to think Evelyn, who had been constantly harassing Gabriel, would ever be unhappy with him. Evelyn scoffed as she looked at Stefan, who appeared amused by her situation. It's not surprising that he found it difficult to trust anyone. "Would you like me to cease making fun of you, or do you wish for me to strike you in the face?" Evelyn warned, stealing Stefan's smile immediately. What did you say?" Stefan stammered, still unable to understand Evelyn's words. "You heard the same thing," Evelyn casually said. Are you okay, Eve? Why do you feel like you banged your head so hard when we collided? Stefan reached out to examine her, but she jerked his hand away. Nothing is wrong with me. I am fine, she replied, ignoring his concerns. Stefan sighed with relief, yet his brow wrinkled. So why are you acting like that? Did something happen to make you upset with Gabriel, or did you finally accept that he will never fall in love with you? Stefan put his hand over Evelyn's shoulder casually, and they continued their stroll. Evelyn was like Stefan's younger sister, and she enjoyed discussing her difficulties with him. When he confronted Evelyn about her feelings for Gabriel, he advised her to give up. And she finally understood why. Look, you're spacing out once more. I'm sure you're not feeling well, else, you wouldn't be talking to yourself. So please tell me what's wrong and why you're furious with Gabriel. Who is upset with whom? A familiar voice inquired, capturing Stefan and Evelyn's attention. Gabriel looked at the two before fixing his eyes on Evelyn. I asked you something. Who is upset with whom? Gabriel had resolved to ignore everything, but when he saw Stefan and Evelyn together, he couldn't resist following them. Evelyn's gaze hardened as she stared at Gabriel with equal intensity and said, Were you eavesdropping on us? Stefan gave Evelyn a scared expression. Stefan was taken aback by Evelyn's cold response to Gabriel. Despite his surprise, Gabriel quickly hid his feelings and moved toward Evelyn. What if I was? He inquired, keeping his gaze fixed on her. While Evelyn was alarmed by their proximity, she refused to leave. She'd always been obedient to Gabriel and tolerated his arrogance in the name of so-called love. She hoped that one day he would recognize her affection and warm his heart, but that never occurred. Instead, he ended up watching her fall from the balcony without showing any sympathy. Have you forgotten your manners? Gabriel's lips twitched at her attitude, but he remained calm. He wondered what he had done to earn Evelyn's impolite manner. I was not eavesdropping, I just wanted to talk to Stefan, who happened to be with you at the time, Gabriel lied, clearly intimidated by her gaze. Stefan unexpectedly remarked, but you said you wanted to be alone, leaving Gabriel speechless. His jaw clenched as he shot a seething glare at Stefan. He expected his friend to comply but instead exposed him. Stupid guy anyway, brother Stefan is yours, Evelyn remarked, taking a step back and turning to leave. Gabriel watched her receding form. His heart torn. Something about Evelyn struck him as unusual, but he couldn't figure out what. So, why were you looking for me? Stefan inquired, taking a step closer to Gabriel, who simply shot him a glare and walked away. Stefan inquired, taking a step closer to Gabriel, who simply shot him a glare and walked away. Evelyn spent the remainder of the day avoiding Tiffany and concentrating on class. When it was time to depart, Evelyn exited the classroom ahead of Tiffany and walked directly to her car. Tiffany, however, hailed Evelyn from behind before she could enter. Evelyn tightened her grasp on the handle and turned to face Tiffany, who was sprinting behind her before tripping and falling to the ground with a thump. Evelyn's eyes clouded as she recognized what Tiffany had done, but to avoid suspicion, she raced to her side and helped her stand. Ah, it hurts, Tiffany exclaimed, stumbling about. Evelyn scoffed mentally as she examined her strategy. She had obviously noticed that there was no stone Tiffany might trip on. She staged an act to get a ride home. Eve, could you just take me home? With this agony, I don't think I'll be able to travel by bus. There you go. Aren't you thinking we should first consult a doctor? What if the sprain is too severe? Evelyn inquired, surprising Tiffany on the spot, and she stuttered through her words. No, I don't think I should see a doctor, just take me home, please. Evelyn realized Tiffany was lying, but she didn't dwell on it too long before agreeing to take her home. Tiffany helped herself into the car, as Evelyn watched and fumed before walking to the other side of the vehicle and getting in. Tiffany quickly exited the premises in her car, having obtained what she desired. Evelyn glanced at Tiffany from the side, but her focus shifted to her phone. She wondered how her so-called buddy had earned her trust, to the point where she never doubted her. Perhaps she was overly friendly, allowing her to play with her emotions until the end. Evelyn couldn't help but mock her misfortune. You seem perfectly fine. Evelyn's words surprised Tiffany, causing her to smile awkwardly. She hurriedly slid the phone into her pocket and turned to face Evelyn. Yes, I believe so. Look, I can move my leg, too. Tiffany rotated her ankle to demonstrate to Evelyn the improvement. So, shall I drop you off here? I see you're okay to go on your own now. Tiffany's smile faded as she heard Evelyn's comments, but she quickly smiled, breaking her concentration. I'm kidding. I am not heartless enough to leave my friend alone, especially after you hurt your ankle. Evelyn forced a smile, perplexing Tiffany with how rapidly her expressions went from chilly to chirpy. Tiffany gave an uneasy smile and nodded her head in approval. Haha, yes. Tiffany felt nervous in front of Evelyn. The girl, who always listened to her and followed her around like a lost dog, made Tiffany nervous. Tiffany remembers meeting Evelyn and how quickly she earned her trust, eventually being her lone friend and well-wisher. But now she was questioning whether she hadn't gotten to know Evelyn more intimately. Leo, please pull over, Evelyn instructed, jolting Tiffany out of her daydream and bringing the automobile to a halt. We have arrived, Evelyn remarked with a smile. Tiffany made a habit of requesting Evelyn to pull over away from her home. Tiffany did not want Evelyn to witness how bad her life was with her inebriated father or how impoverished she was, not because she couldn't get her there. Tiffany smiled and turned to exit the vehicle, but Evelyn stopped her. Tiffany, what is it that you talked about with Gabriel? Tiffany glanced at Evelyn with a dubious gaze and mumbled, What did I say? She inquired, pretending ignorance even though it was clear that she understood what Evelyn was saying. Evelyn surprised Gabriel this morning, but when she saw Tiffany rush to him, she paused and attempted to see through her lie, all the while continuing to brainwash Gabriel. I hope you did not badmouth me. Evelyn returned home after Tiffany denied gaslighting her in front of Gabriel. Despite her lack of self-confidence, she felt forced to warn her friend that she was keeping an eye on her and everything she attempted to accomplish behind her back. Evelyn tried to keep Tiffany on her toes and dissuade her from using her crafty ways to wreck her life, but she didn't mind if Tiffany got suspicious of her comment. Young miss, your orange juice. Susan's voice jolted Evelyn out of her trance, causing her to sit up. Evelyn realized she still hadn't changed, but the exhaustion from the day didn't seem to go away. Young miss, are you confident that there is nothing wrong with you? Should I consult a doctor, in your opinion? Susan maintained a careful eye on Evelyn, who couldn't stop inquiring. Uncertainty flashed through her eyes as she turned to face the lady. After her mother's death, Susan took on the role of Evelyn's nanny, and her familiarity with Evelyn's actions enabled her to quickly identify her behavior. She was now certain that there was indeed a problem with Evelyn. She questioned whether Susan hadn't noticed something was wrong. Staring at the lady, she soon realized how much she missed her during those lonely times. Susan had cared for her since she was a child, listening to her whine and offering guidance as a mother would. But everything changed when she married Gabriel. Susan quit her job and departed without a word. Susan left wondering where she had gone and why she had never once contacted her. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn discarded all of her concerns and, smiling in response, said, Susan, I'm fine. I never lied when I said I was afraid of a nightmare, she insists. Evelyn didn't want others to be suspicious of her. So she sought to guarantee that everything was okay and that she could carry on with her life as usual. Once Susan was convinced that Evelyn was fine, she didn't pursue the topic further and quickly left the room after placing the juice. Bathroom, Evelyn took off her clothes and stood under the shower, allowing the cool water to pour from her naked body. Her heart clenched with each passing second, and recollections of her past life blurred her vision. Evelyn made every attempt to prove her innocence after marrying Gabriel. But, despite her efforts, he never trusted her. He conveyed the impression that he had already concluded that she was the one who had exploited him to gain entry into his life. However, he remained unaware that evening that she had also received drugs. Too quick to pass judgment on those who had taken advantage of her generosity, Evelyn understood that no one could have foretold her death and slammed her fist angrily on the wall. The murder of her friend and husband was an even more terrifying nightmare. But now that she had come back to atone for her mistake, she would never allow anyone to step on her again. Evelyn hurriedly bathed, dressed, and exited the bathroom. She then drank the drink Susan had given her earlier and took a nap. Evelyn had encountered incidents that significantly changed her life. She took precautions to prevent experiencing the same situation that would lead to someone taking advantage of her. With that thought, she closed her eyes and allowed sleep to take over her drained mind. Winston's mansion. After a disappointing day, Gabriel went back home. But before he could reach his room, his mother, Belle, stopped him. "You are home." Not only was Belle Winston the matriarch of the Winston family, but she also played a key role in founding the Winston Group. Besides being a doting wife, she also gave her all to raising her kids, Gabriel and Daniel. Gabriel stopped abruptly upon hearing his mother's voice and glanced at her, who gestured for him to approach. Gabriel didn't want to chat, but he had to comply with his mother's request and join her on the couch. "I thought you were supposed to go teach Evelyn at the Miller house," Belle said to me. Gabriel's eyes grew chilly as he remembered Richard ordering him to tutor Evelyn per her request. He didn't voice his rejection at the time, but now he regrets not doing so. "Mom, she can pay any tutor for her academics, so why should I go teach her?" Gabriel stated his reluctance to visit Evelyn. Gabriel expressed his reluctance to see Evelyn due to the unpleasantness she had caused him. "Yes, she can, but she asked Richard to persuade you," Belle explained. "And you understand that your father cannot refuse her request, so you must go and instruct her, no matter what you say." Gabriel frowned, wondering why Belle would listen to him when Evelyn had his parents completely under control. Evelyn was the child of her best friend, Erna, who died from an incurable disease, leaving Evelyn under their care. Since then, Belle has raised and treasured her like her own kid. "What are you waiting for? Get changed. I don't want my daughter to miss her academics." Belle softly nudged Gabriel away, and he reluctantly stood up to leave. Miller Mansion. Evelyn was sound asleep when the nightmare of her death resurfaced again. Tiffany shoving her off the balcony and Gabriel's empty expression were the last things she thought about, keeping her subconsciously awake and forcing her to lose her sleep. She jolted up to sit on the bed, gasping for air and slowly taking in the surroundings. Evelyn thought everything around her was a mirage, and she had returned to her deathbed. Fortunately, it was only a dream, and nothing had actually altered. Evelyn was deep in thought when she heard a knock on the door and saw Susan enter with some news. Susan said, young Master Gabriel is waiting for you downstairs," which confused Evelyn. Evelyn gasped as she remembered her request to Richard. When Evelyn expressed a desire to have Gabriel tutor her in her studies, Richard agreed immediately. She believed that this would allow her to better understand Gabriel. Tiffany, another intruder, interrupted her wish by pleading with her to let her join them because she was also having trouble understanding some of the chapters. Evelyn's face reddened as she remembered how Tiffany overshadowed her and began approaching Gabriel. "How did I not recognize her scheme back then?" she scoffed, partially attributing the conspiracy to herself. "Downstairs, I apologize for causing you any inconvenience, son, but as you are well aware, Evelyn ignored my advice to find another tutor." Jonathan stated apologetically, "I had no idea she would already ask Richard about this," he added. "It is okay, Uncle. It would be more efficient if I dedicated this hour to teaching Eve, as I don't have any other obligations." Jonathan had been admiring Gabriel since he was a child. He was not only considerate but also thoughtful to Evelyn, who was continually causing him problems. Susan soon joined the two and informed Gabriel that they were waiting for Evelyn in their study room. Gabriel promptly excused himself and entered the study, where he found Evelyn waiting for him. Gabriel has visited the Miller house before. He spent the majority of his childhood here with Stefan and Evelyn. However, today, he found it unusual to meet Evelyn alone in the room. When Gabriel approached Evelyn, she stopped him and said, "I am sorry for the trouble, but you do not have to come here to teach me." Gabriel glared and scoffed in surprise when he heard Evelyn's statements. "So, why did you ask my father to convince me to teach you?" he queried with a slightly angry tone. It was a mistake, and I do not wish to learn anything from you. Therefore, you are under no obligation to come here. Evelyn's caustic statements infuriated Gabriel even more. He couldn't understand why Evelyn was being rude to him, especially when she was the one who forced him to come here. Gabriel took a deep breath, his anger building, but he managed to suppress it before asking, "Have I offended you in any way? You've been treating me badly since the morning." Gabriel expressed what was on his mind. Evelyn had never been so antagonistic to him before, but her recent actions had made him wonder whether he had done something wrong to deserve such treatment. "Don't you remember?" Evelyn mocked, her eyes going gloomy. Gabriel remained motionless, his mind struggling to understand what she had said. Although it was obvious to him, the way she looked at him just now made his stomach turn. He was concerned that she may tumble earlier. But his generosity was misconstrued. "Can you just tell me what I did wrong?" Gabriel crossed his hands. "Was warning you a wrong intention?" He fixed his eyes on her, waiting anxiously for an answer. Evelyn couldn't believe Gabriel would be interested in her response, especially since he never intended to wait. He always thought she was a foolish girl and blamed her for everything that happened. All of his deeds throughout her prior existence demonstrated how ruthless he was. Evelyn's blood curdled with wrath as the feeling of betrayal rushed over her, regretting her love for him to the point of losing her self-esteem. However, she was unable to express her feelings or allow him to mock her. Evelyn took a deep breath, disregarded all thoughts, and returned his stare with the same steely eyes. "Listen, Gabriel. I realize that you initially did not want to come and tutor me. I compelled you to come here after asking Uncle Richard about it. But now, I've realized my mistake, and I no longer want to learn anything from you," Evelyn stated simply, leaving Gabriel suspicious. He had never adapted to Evelyn's coldness, but today he felt like someone she detested. Is she serious right now? He wondered. Evelyn, on the other hand, saw a shift in his gaze. Was it the contemplation she saw in those eyes, or was he finding a way to laugh at her? She was unable to express her feelings, yet she could not imagine sharing the same space with him. "So, there's no need for you to come here," she said, leaving Gabriel stunned. Evelyn's words struck like a knife, piercing his heart with a cruel blow. "I have already lost my face due to my years-long crush on you, but I no longer want to associate with you in any way." Gabriel clenched his jaw in wrath at the sound of her angry remarks and walked away solemnly. "Scoff, does he think his anger still bothers me?" Evelyn muttered, ignoring his exit, and turned to return to her room. Jonathan remained seated downstairs but rose up when he saw Gabriel walk back down. He intended to ask Gabriel where he was going, but he stopped when Gabriel walked away without looking back. Why did he leave like that? He wondered. Jonathan may not be outraged, but Gabriel's departure shouted anger. His gaze immediately focused on the first floor, where he observed Evelyn walking the corridor and entering her room. Did they fight? Jonathan mumbled a statement that didn't align well with his understanding, as it hadn't happened often. However, given the circumstances, he couldn't help but wonder if they had indeed engaged in an argument. Outside, Gabriel got into his car and drove away from the mansion's gates. He got angry and wished to scold Evelyn for her bluntness, but he couldn't since he felt helpless at the thought of her being disrespectful to him in the first place. It had never happened before, so it felt strange to suddenly see the change in her heart for him. But then he didn't expect it. Gabriel continued to speed up, his mind racing over her words. "You don't need to come here," she said, her anger intensifying. "I was mistaken for crushing on you, and now I don't want to associate with you anymore." Arg! Gabriel slammed the brakes and jerked the vehicle to the side of the road. He had never been so agitated, but the way she ended their relationship enraged him. What is her opinion of herself? Is she perceived as a leader who has the authority to say anything she wants, or as a princess who has the ability to manipulate everyone around her? Gabriel let out a frustrated groan and smacked his fist on the steering wheel. He couldn't tell what hurt him more, her rejection or the hatred in her eyes. Helpless, he dropped his head against the steering wheel, feeling a weird sensation creeping into his heart. The restlessness continues to increase. Gabriel never objected to Evelyn's adoration. He could feel his heart skip a beat because Evelyn's adoration was so evident, but he never tried to acknowledge it. She was a young girl, and he believed it was a silly idea, so he never once tried to admit that she had a crush on him. Despite knowing that she would soon leave him and that these fleeting feelings would not last forever, he gradually grew accustomed to her reflex. Even though Gabriel will never accept it, he appreciated that she did not treat him like her brother because he does not intend to have a sister, especially not one with whom he practically grew up. Still, he hesitated a little, as he started to believe that Evelyn's activities were inappropriate and that they should simply maintain their relationship. Gabriel sneered and stared out the window, his eyes filled with hate. I am glad she realized there is nothing we can have together. Even though Gabriel had known Evelyn since childhood, he did not truly believe in her. She never truly committed herself to anything in her life. She may have stated that she doesn't want to do anything with him, but how long will that last? After another minute, Gabriel finally calmed enough to start his car and drive away. Meanwhile, Evelyn was pleased with the results. She couldn't help but be satisfied with Gabriel's expression. She had spent her entire life chasing him for his attention, forsaking her dignity. But today she was able to see the expression of dejection in his eyes, which gave her a sense of satisfaction. Let's not worry about him anymore, she admonished herself and got out of bed. Evelyn chose to study and was about to proceed to the study table when a knock on the door stopped her in her tracks, and she saw her father enter. Evelyn didn't expect Jonathan to show up here straight away because she assumed he would be preoccupied with his work. However, now that he has arrived, she greets him with a smile. I expected Gabriel would tutor you. However, the boy stormed out. Is everything fine between the two of you? He inquired, his face displaying a hint of doubt. Jonathan was aware that Evelyn disliked initiating conflicts, but he couldn't help but question why Gabriel would go when there was no issue between them. Dad, I believe I won't need Gabriel's assistance any longer. Evelyn remarked, I am fine studying myself. Jonathan was puzzled. But didn't you pester Richard to persuade Gabriel to tutor you? He inquired, his tone betraying surprise. Evelyn had essentially sugar-coated Richard into hiring Gabriel as her academic coach, and now she is abruptly removing him from his responsibilities. She was aware that her decision was premature, but she needed to act severely to keep Gabriel at a remove. Dad, I've come to the realization that you were correct when you suggested not to worry about Gabriel, as he already has a significant workload. Furthermore, I think it would be beneficial to follow your recommendation and hire a different tutor. Evelyn said, recalling his past advice. Jonathan struggled to understand Evelyn's quick turn in attitude, but he decided it was best to have a different tutor rather than bother Gabriel with everything. So, who do you want to hire? Do you have somebody in mind? He asked, and Evelyn went ahead and provided Jonathan the names of other professors who may help her. Gabriel arrived home earlier than expected but did not greet anyone and went straight to his room. When he walked in, his eyes darkened as he watched his brother lie comfortably on his tidy bed, reading a book. How many times have I told you, Daniel, to keep your shoes off my bed? You're messing with my bedsheet. Gabriel expressed his dissatisfaction. He preferred that his stuff remained intact and that no one misplaced it. When did you begin reading romance novels, brother? Daniel inquired about his brother's quick shift in tastes. Gabriel marched to the bed and pulled the book from his grasp. Don't you realize that peeking into people's personal belongings is impolite? Where are your manners, Daniel? Gabriel stared at his brother before returning the book to his shelves. Daniel Winston embodied the archetypal younger brother, relishing in causing trouble for his sibling. Daniel Winston was consistently bothersome, or as Gabriel described it, a nuisance. Daniel was much funnier and more carefree than his older brother, who was quiet and composed. Daniel knew Gabriel would never detest him, no matter how many reprimands he received. He was the type of brother who liked to discipline his brothers while also loving them wholeheartedly. Daniel jumped off the bed and approached his irate brother. He realized Gabriel wasn't in a positive mood, which prompted him to tease him. Do not tell me, brother, that you have finally found the one melting your stone-like heart." Daniel dreamily blinked, irritating Gabriel even more with his dumb remark. Gabriel didn't want to remember the day Evelyn gave him that book for his birthday. She had always been respectful of his tastes, but this year for his birthday, she surprised him with a book, a love novel, no less. Gabriel enjoyed reading and was well versed in academics, but this time she chose a book to show her affections for him. However, she was unaware that he already understood her emotions and was taken aback by her gift. However, Gabriel glared at his brother like an eagle at its prey. "Daniel Winston, you should remain silent if you want your father to learn about your midterm results." Daniel dropped his act, practically pleading with his brother, as his eyes widened in fear. "Brother, please don't tell Dad about it. He is going to take my allowance away every month." Even though Belle and Richard's family was well known in Country S, they raised their sons with extreme strictness. They were aware of the importance of perseverance and the years it took them to reach their current position. Gabriel and Daniel never had an inflated sense of self-worth and instead showed respect for their parents. But the one thing that worries them is that their parents are picky about their academic performance. One being one of the highest shareholders of Aspen College, Richard wanted both his sons to excel in their studies. Despite not being careless with his studies, Daniel received a slightly lower score than anticipated, and Gabriel was now retaliating against him for his taunting. Gabriel shot him a fierce look that made him immediately stop acting. "Tell me now what brought you here." Gabriel changed the subject and walked back towards the couch before tossing his bag aside and taking the seat. A sudden thought struck Daniel. "Are you and Evelyn not on good terms?" And he hurried to Gabriel's side. "Are they true? Did you really fight with her?" Daniel, a first-year student at Aspen Colleges, became aware of the news that some other students had shared on the forum. Along with the remarks, the forum circulated a few images of Evelyn and Gabriel exchanging glaring looks. Gabriel grabbed the phone out of Daniel's grasp, erased the web page, and then shoved it back in his hand. "If you have nothing further to say, kindly depart." "I do not feel like talking to anyone right now," Gabriel said, leaning back on the couch and shutting his eyes. Daniel narrowed his eyes, studying every curve of Gabriel's face with suspicion. It was obvious that there was a problem between them based on his seeming irritation. TCH. Now, I am confident that both of you did indeed fight. But why?" Daniel furrowed his brow and rubbed his chin. Daniel swallowed, erasing the Sherlock Holmes expression from his face as Gabriel glared at him. "Haha, my only concern was for you, brother. Why not tell Mom and Dad? We grew up together. I am sure they will scold you for hurting their precious daughter, Evelyn," Daniel stated, comfortably adjusting himself on the couch. Evelyn and Daniel forged a strong friendship, and she also helped Daniel secure acceptance into the course of his choice. With Evelyn, he was able to fulfill his lifelong desire for a sister. But after reading the post on the forum, he worried that things might change. "Why are you so worried about whether or not we get along?" Gabriel asked, suddenly becoming more interested in Daniel's explanation about Evelyn than in himself. "I understand that Evelyn wouldn't become upset without a reason." Gabriel arched his brow in surprise at Daniel's response. "And what makes you think that I am at fault?" This time, he asked me to get up and sit down. Sensing the tension in his brother's demeanor, Daniel sat back slowly. "That is because you always seem distant from her, and I fear that if you do not change, I will no longer have a sister like her." Gabriel twitched his lips in irritation and gritted, "Daniel Winston, why would you want a sister when you have me? Do you not like me?" Previously, Gabriel would have been unaffected if his brother or parents referred to Evelyn as their sister. But things changed when he found out that she was in love with him, and now he finds the word sister bothersome. Daniel, on the other hand, winced at Gabriel's outburst and crept downstairs from the couch. "I like you, brother, but my favorite person is my sister Evelyn." He claimed to have fled his room as if he were a mouse running for its life. Gabriel snorted, disappointed that Daniel preferred Evelyn to be his sister rather than his brother. Gabriel took a moment to push aside his irksome attitude and focus on his studies. As a final-year student, Gabriel had a ton of assignments and projects that required more of his time than teaching Evelyn. Thus, he set everything aside, took a seat in front of the study table, and began working on his homework. A certain someone was growing agitated because the unexpected turn of events had caught her off guard, while Gabriel and Evelyn were preoccupied with their respective studies. Tiffany struggled to remove Evelyn's words from her mind, and they provided her with some insight into why Evelyn had said them. "Did she get suspicious of me?" Tiffany muttered, contemplating Evelyn's last impression of her before she drove off. Tiffany became concerned that her plan might not succeed because it seemed more like a casual remark than a convincing one. "Will you continue to stand there? Where's my food, God damn it?" Her father, who was sitting behind her, interrupted Tiffany's thoughts with his drunken yelling. Rolling her eyes, she angrily slammed the cloth on the kitchen island before turning to confront Jacob, who was complaining incoherently on the couch. "Stop being such a winner, you poor drunk. I am not here to listen to your constant crying. Just be quiet and wait for her to come make you dinner," Tiffany yelled angrily at her father, who was too far away to understand her. She had lived her entire life in this manner from birth. Her father would gamble or drink himself to insanity using the money her mother earned from her job. Not a single day went by that someone knocked on their door requesting money, which Jacob would take. The only breadwinner in her household was her mother. However, she was baffled as to why she had let go of her pathetic husband, who served only as a burden for them. Ignoring his tirade, Tiffany brought her food and proceeded to her room. Their residence was a single-story home. She occupied a room, while her parents took up residence in the living hall. Taking care of her drunken father every day was a drain. Tiffany, however, was aware that her mother would never want her to simply forget about him. Watching her mother struggle was heartbreaking, but as a result, she worked hard in school and received a scholarship to attend Aspen. She aspired to provide them with a better life, and in order to do so, she needed to establish connections. Her first and only victim was Evelyn. "Tiffany, I am back." A voice interrupted her reverie, and she spun to see the door to her rundown room open. Tiffany gawked at her mother and said, "Mom, you are late." Susan, wearing an apologetic expression, entered the room and gave her a hug. "I am sorry. I had to ensure that the young lady had finished her dinner, as she had been studying for hours," Susan reasoned before pulling away. Does your young miss require assurance regarding her errands?" Tiffany frowned in exasperation, recalling her mother's preference to gaze at her young miss instead of her own child. "I am sorry, it will not happen again," Susan apologized once again before darting her gaze at the bowl of noodles Tiffany was eating. "Why are you eating this? Didn't you read my note?" Susan asked with furrowed brows. Susan would always make sure that Tiffany had something to eat when she got home from college. But it upset her to watch her consume these unhealthy noodles. "I did read your note, but your useless husband finished the food you prepared." The emotionlessness in Tiffany's voice made Susan realize what had transpired. Dropping her shoulders in defeat, Susan sighed. "Let me make you something healthy to eat," Susan said, and she turned to go. "Why are you putting up with him, Mom? Can't you just cut ties with him?" Tiffany's words stopped Susan, causing her to turn around and smile sadly. Even though sharing your life with someone you love is unbearable, it is difficult to let them go. Tiffany's eyes darkened as she watched her mother leave. "Scoff, what good is all this love if he can't even make your life happy?" Tiffany muttered, then resumed her meal. Tiffany mumbled under her breath and returned to her meal. Evelyn did indeed go to sleep more quickly than she had anticipated after studying late into the evening, but those nightmares woke her up. She has been tossing and turning ever since, unable to fall back asleep. Evelyn was staring at the ceiling without making any movement when her alarm went off. She flinched and slackly patted it shut before hauling her weary body up onto the bed. Evelyn suffered from insomnia, which made it difficult for her to fall asleep. Evelyn's husband, who kept her awake until late at night, was the primary cause of her insomnia. "Let us get ready, Evelyn." With that chant, she pushed herself off the bed and made her way to the restroom. Evelyn reached Aspen College using the same route where Tiffany would wait for her, but today she didn't see her standing at the stop as usual. Maybe her words from yesterday indeed alerted her and she finally gave up the idea of using her as a ladder for success. Before long, Evelyn noticed Gabriel's vehicle pulling up to the college entrance and stopping beside hers. But her eyebrows knitted at the one that leaped out. Tiffany got out of the car first, followed by Gabriel, and as soon as they locked eyes, her so-called friend muttered something to him and hurried over to be by her side. Evelyn, who was staring at Gabriel, gave herself a mental snicker before turning to face Tiffany, who had by now moved to stand beside her. I am sure you are wondering how Gabriel and I arrived together. Tiffany's annoying voice made Evelyn cringe inwardly, but she continued to keep on smiling and said, because you wished to be near him more. Tiffany's smile faltered and her eyes narrowed at her remark. What did you say? She asked again, making sure she understood what Evelyn meant to say. As soon as Evelyn realized what she had said in jest, she quickly corrected herself. Because you were trying to bring us closer, remember, she chirped, maintaining the same forceful smile. If Evelyn recalled it, Tiffany had offered her help to bring her and Gabriel closer. Evelyn did not know that under an amiable exterior, she was putting her trust in a snake that would gradually ruin her life when she first revealed her feelings to Tiffany. She believed she could make Gabriel fall in love with her with Tiffany's assistance. But what she does not realize is that Tiffany is gradually gaining Gabriel's trust, carving out a place in his heart for herself, and manipulating him to manipulate their relationship. Tiffany's expression softened, and she sighed before smiling once more. Yes, you are right. How can I forget that? Even though Tiffany was grinning, Evelyn despised her because of the sinister glint in her laugh. Evelyn suddenly stopped smiling and turned to head towards the building, with Tiffany walking by her side. Tiffany relaxed and sighed as she watched Evelyn come to terms with her lie. If only she knew how she purposely skipped her bus to the college and shamelessly waited for Gabriel's car for help, Evelyn would have doubted her. Eve, you are such a fool. Do you really think that letting you have the most popular guy in our college is a sign of my kindness? So what are your plans for helping me? Evelyn asked, observing Tiffany walking in silence. You might have strategies or methods for bringing us together if you came with Gabriel, after all. Can you elaborate with me? Evelyn asked, startling Tiffany out of her thoughts. Her speech trailed off as her mind froze. Was dash dot. It's okay, you don't have to tell me right now. Think about it before the class ends. Evelyn cut Tiffany's words, darting her gaze ahead as they finally reached the classroom. Tiffany awkwardly smiled, but Evelyn's words made her eyes wary as they made their way into the classroom. Evelyn chose to sit by herself as usual, which caused many people to wonder if Tiffany and Evelyn were really best friends. What's wrong? How come you are not seated next to her? Gracie, one of the students, inquired after Tiffany sat with her. She was aware that Tiffany and Evelyn were inseparable, making Tiffany one of the class's most pertinent students. She began to attract attention by befriending students who looked up to Evelyn because of her bond with Evelyn. However, Evelyn was unaware that Tiffany had brainwashed some students into feeling sympathy for her by lying to them about the nature of their relationship. Evelyn was depicted by her as an evil girl who aspired to be a rebel due to her social standing. Her kind demeanor was merely an attempt to make her seem relevant. While some of them thought Evelyn would truly have such a personality, others did not share their views. Although the situation was evenly balanced, Tiffany was adamant about damaging Evelyn's reputation as a nice girl to reduce her appeal to the students. Therefore, Tiffany seized the opportunity to expose Evelyn to the full college as soon as Evelyn told her about Gabriel by posting the information on the Aspen College forum page. She posted a caption with Evelyn's photo and Gabriel mentioning her childhood crush using a fictitious ID that she had used to log in. When Evelyn confronted Tiffany, she lied and claimed that one of the students had overheard them talking and had taken advantage of the conversation, with Evelyn, who easily believed her. But following that day, Gabriel began to display more distance from Evelyn's reaction. I think she has been upset with me since Gabriel and I are becoming closer. You know how devoted she is to him, Gracie said, her mouth hanging open in disbelief at Tiffany's statement. One, but aren't you her best friend? Then why should she get upset? Gracie asked, still finding it hard to believe Tiffany's remark over Evelyn's possessive nature towards Gabriel. Gracie was one of the students who saw Evelyn and Gabriel interact yesterday, and she looked offended by his remark. Then how is it that she says Evelyn is possessive of Gabriel? You do not really believe me. Observing the suspicious twinkle in Gracie's eyes, Tiffany spoke. Gracie was taken aback by Tiffany's claim and she scoffed. It's hard to believe that Evelyn is possessive of Gabriel after whatever happened yesterday. She doesn't seem interested in him anymore. Tiffany's face dropped hearing Gracie's remark. It was then she recalled how Evelyn repulsed to Gabriel's advice and blamed him for colliding with her. That's an act to get his sympathy, she blurted out of spite but soon masked her emotions, putting on an innocent look. An act? Gracie muttered, casting her a bewildered glance. Yeah, an attempt to regain Gabriel's trust, which she had lost due to the post in which she revealed her infatuation with him, Tiffany said with a convincing tone that made Gracie ponder her words. I will reveal something to you that nobody else is aware of, Tiffany muttered, beckoning Gracie to approach while brainwashing her against Evelyn with her mumbling. No way, Gracie exclaimed, finding it difficult to accept Tiffany's statement. She threatened you to help her win Gabriel in exchange for your respect. Please don't tell anyone or else Evelyn will not spare me, Tiffany begged Gracie. Gracie was one of the top 10 students in terms of academic excellence. She had always attempted to outperform Evelyn, but she was never able to do so, and she would consistently rank in second place on the chart. Once she eventually accepted that Evelyn was, in fact, an excellent student and a nice girl who had once assisted her. However, after speaking with Tiffany, her feelings about Evelyn started to waver. Tiffany, however, grinned at Gracie's solemn expression. She skillfully managed to manipulate another student against Evelyn. Evelyn was the most popular student at Aspen, not because she was Jonathan Miller's daughter, but rather because of her warm disposition toward everyone. She attracted a lot of followers with her smile and was always willing to lend a helping hand to students who needed it. During these 3 years, a lot of students started to view her as an inspiration. On the other hand, not many people disliked her and Gracie was one among them. She had always competed with Evelyn to secure the top position, but would always end up being second. Gracie was a sweet, quiet girl who preferred to keep to herself, but she did occasionally let her guard down around Evelyn because Evelyn had once assisted her. But after what Tiffany said, she knew she had managed to gain another supporter in her league. The class soon began and everyone engrossed themselves in gaining knowledge. During the lunch break, Evelyn excused herself and headed towards the staff section to meet Professor Beckham, whom she suggested Jonathan seek coaching from. Professor, may I come in? Knocking on the door, said Evelyn. Yes, Miss Miller, please come in, the man in his late 50s said. Professor Beckham was one of the finest professors of Aspen College, and Evelyn wanted to get his assistance in studies. Even as one of the best students, she was not without her share of fears. But now that she understands how Tiffany's deception caused her to lose focus on her career and divert her attention from her studies in an attempt to win Gabriel over, she will never want to repeat the same mistakes. Evelyn had allowed others to influence her life wrongly, but not anymore. She was going to live life to the fullest and pursue her dream of becoming a prosperous businesswoman. Evelyn walked and took a seat in front of Professor Beckham's desk. While she was in her office talking to the professor about something that had to do with her studies, Tiffany stood outside his office wondering why Evelyn visited Professor Beckham's office. When the bell rang, she followed her surreptitiously, wondering if she would meet Gabriel. However, her assumption was incorrect, as she ended up at the staff office instead of meeting Gabriel. Why is she taking so long? Tiffany mumbled, wondering what Evelyn needed to talk to the professor, but her train of thought was interrupted when she saw Gabriel approaching her. Tiffany ducked behind the pillar quickly, hiding herself from Gabriel until he knocked on Professor Beckham's office door and walked in. When the door shut, Tiffany's expression grew melancholic at the thought of Gabriel and Evelyn being together. She wondered what both Gabriel and Evelyn had to discuss with the professor and how she wasn't aware of it. Inside, Gabriel paused for a few seconds when his eyes fell on Evelyn before Professor Beckham's voice broke his trance. Gabriel, what brings you here? Professor Beckham questioned, glancing at Gabriel. It was then Evelyn too turned to see the person who had just walked in. Evelyn saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes the instant their eyes met, but she quickly averted her gaze, ignoring Gabriel entirely. Gabriel's heart fell, but he got himself together fast and moved over to the table. These are the project reports that you requested, Professor. Gabriel turned over the assignment file to Professor Beckham. Professor Beckham gave Gabriel a perplexed look before turning his eyes on the report. That was too quick, Gabriel. You were supposed to hand these reports to me by the end of this month. If so, congratulations on finishing your research project. Professor Beckham praised Gabriel. See, Miss Miller, this is the reason I advised you to ask Gabriel for assistance. He is the most qualified student to assist you with the business management course, he added. Evelyn was meant to convince Professor Beckham to guide her through the semester, but he had a seminar in Columbia on the week and would be returning by the end of this month. He suggested Evelyn call Gabriel for advice because he did not want her to miss her studies as a result of him. While Evelyn was content to wait for him to return, Professor Beckham was concerned that Evelyn would miss those lessons while he was away. Unaware of what had transpired, Gabriel quickly looked away when he heard Evelyn's reply. That is all right, Professor, I can wait until you get back, she uttered, politely declining his suggestion. How was Evelyn supposed to agree with Professor Beckham when she refused to seek Gabriel's guidance the other day? However, Professor Beckham was unable to turn down Evelyn's request. Since Evelyn was one of the smarter students, he was unable to compromise her academics because he had always given his students' requests for advice greater weight. Gabriel, will it be okay for you to tutor Evelyn until I return? Professor Beckham questioned, glancing at Gabriel. Tiffany stood there for 15 minutes, waiting for Gabriel or Evelyn to leave. Finally, after 15 minutes, Professor Beckham's office door opened, and Gabriel left. Tiffany was about to walk towards Gabriel, but she stopped to look at the person behind him. The joy in her eyes disappeared. Her brows furrowed in confusion as she watched Gabriel turn to face Evelyn. Quickly hiding back, Tiffany tried to eavesdrop on them. But no matter what, she was unable to hear a word. Meanwhile, there was an awkward silence between Evelyn and Gabriel. While Evelyn was cursing her fate, which slapped right into her face, Gabriel was somewhat happy with Professor Beckham's suggestion. When would you like to start the lessons? I am free this afternoon. If that is okay, let us go to the library and start studying, Gabriel said in a tone that was more gentle than ever. Gabriel's indulgence momentarily surprised Evelyn, but she was unable to express her disapproval. Regardless of how charming he spoke to her, she would constantly question his motivations. Evelyn sneered mentally, recalling how Gabriel agreed with Professor Beckham when he would have refused to guide her. He had left the other day when she refused to ask for his assistance, but now he was obligingly complying with the professor's request to tutor her by the time he returned. Just as she turned to face him, out of the corner of her eye, she noticed a figure lurking behind the pillar. It didn't take long for Evelyn to realize who it was, and she instantly changed her idea and put on a smile. Evelyn's smile made Gabriel's eyes prick up, and his heart skipped a beat. It was the same smile he had been missing since yesterday. And at last, he caught a glimpse of the former Evelyn once more. Evelyn took a step and moved slightly closer to Gabriel, almost surprising him. As long as you are comfortable teaching me, I do not mind. Gabriel swallowed at Evelyn's honey-colored words. He was taken aback by Evelyn's sudden boldness, however it was also the first time he had noticed Evelyn's natural beauty. Her black hair flowed smoothly over her shoulder. Those hazel brown eyes stared brightly at him, and those heart-shaped lips appeared so juicy that he wanted to kiss them. For Evelyn waited to see how Gabriel would respond, but the longer he continued to stare at her like a devoted puppy, the more she felt like ranting at him. What would this look as if he is smitten by me? Evelyn considered it for a moment but quickly changed her mind because she knew Gabriel would never look at her that way. Tiffany, on the other hand, was shocked to see Gabriel's lack of resistance toward Evelyn. She remembered how he hated being touched or even shared a meter radius with any girl, but with Evelyn, he appeared comfortable. Alright, let us meet in the library after lunch, Gabriel eventually said, emerging from his reverie with a sincere smile on the corner of his lips. This time, Evelyn was taken aback by Gabriel's response to her. This was the first time she had seen Gabriel smile at her, and that too with such genuineness, and it somewhat melted her heart. No, Evelyn, you can't lose your focus this time. Remember how he treated you back then. Don't fall for his charms. Evelyn took a quick step back, her eyes growing cold as she thought of Gabriel's cruelty in her previous life crossed her mind. Gabriel's smile vanished at Evelyn's sudden retreat. Giving him a quick nod, she then turned and walked away from there without sparing him another glance. Tiffany hurriedly hid herself, thinking Evelyn would go before she approached Gabriel. However, to her surprise, Evelyn stood right before her. Tiffany froze, her eyes unnaturally still. The sight of Evelyn's icy gaze caused her mind to go blank. Tiffany, what are you doing here, trying to sneak up on us? Evelyn asked, her gaze piercing her every being. Evelyn would have ignored Tiffany, but when she saw her stalking them, she couldn't control her urge to get back on her. Tiffany had taken advantage of her kindness back then, but in this life, she wouldn't let her fool her. She acted like a friend to whom Evelyn could put her faith, only to see her crumble that trust in front of her eyes. Gabriel, who observed Evelyn stop abruptly, furrowed. She was looking at something behind the pillar with apparent displeasure. What's the matter? He said, and without wasting any time, he quickly reached her side. What's wrong? Gabriel asked Evelyn before he followed her line of sight and found Tiffany behind the pillar. You? What are you doing here? He asked, giving Tiffany a serious look. Evelyn, who had no idea that Gabriel would follow her, smile. She could not help but notice the expression on Tiffany's face and wonder how she would react. Tiffany, however, was astounded to see Gabriel. It was unexpected, but looking at Gabriel with that displeased look on his face made her heart race. She looked back and forth between Gabriel and Evelyn, trying to think of a lie, but before she could say anything, Evelyn spoke. She was waiting for me? Weren't you Tiffany? Evelyn questioned, darting her gaze to Tiffany, who was once more left perplexed. Tiffany squinted her eyes, unsure of what Evelyn was attempting to accomplish. One moment she was accusing her of following them, and the next moment she was covering up for her. Then why did you appear so displeased looking at her? Gabriel furrowed his brow upon hearing Evelyn's response. Gabriel had noticed the same look on Evelyn's face when she saw Tiffany coming with him. The kind of despise that even Evelyn couldn't hide made Gabriel wonder whether she hated Tiffany and whatever she told him this morning was true. I am sorry, but Evelyn refused to take me with her because she no longer finds me helpful. She thinks I am somewhat hindering her image. Although Gabriel had trouble believing Tiffany at the time, his mind strayed when he saw Evelyn's response to Tiffany. Gabriel was aware that Evelyn was not the type of girl to discard someone when they were no longer useful to her. She was the kind of girl who valued relationships. So why, he wondered, would she treat Tiffany that way? Tiffany, on the other hand, wasn't expecting Gabriel to follow Evelyn, but now that he did, she had to put up with the act and stop herself from getting exposed. Yeah, I was waiting for Evelyn, she blurted, trying not to show how nervous she was, and moved to stand beside Evelyn. Evelyn smiled at Tiffany's submissiveness. She knew Tiffany would never want Gabriel to know her reality and would do everything to keep her lies protected. Gabriel furrowed at Tiffany's behavior, but he quickly darted his gaze toward Evelyn and reminded her. After lunch, in the library, he said, before leaving the two by themselves and walking off. Tiffany let out a sigh as she watched Gabriel's retreating figure, but before she could question Evelyn about it, she noticed that she was turning to go without giving her another look. What is wrong with her? Tiffany furrowed before she decided to follow her. Gabriel arrived at the classroom just in time to witness Stefan flirting with a classmate. His best friend was known for hanging out with several girls, but he was never truly in a relationship with any of them. In terms of their personalities, Stefan and Gabriel were completely different from one another. However, he had the same attractive appearance as Gabriel and was just as popular with the girls. The moment Stefan noticed Gabriel, he dropped his act and excused himself before approaching him. Gabby, why didn't you tell me that you already prepared the reports? I would not need to beg for assistance from others. Stefan grumbled, gesturing to the girl who had given him a seductive grin. Stefan gave her an awkward smile in return, then turned back to face Gabriel. Observing the brief exchange of gazes, Gabriel shook his head helplessly before packing his stuff. And what would have happened if I had informed you? Were you going to do anything about it? Gabriel asked, looking at Stefan. Whether he told Stefan or not, he knew that his friend was not going to be of assistance to him. He actually had to put in more effort to assist him instead. Stefan sighed after giving his remarks some thought. You are correct, nothing would have happened, but at least you would have assisted me in writing my report. You are aware that compiling all the necessary data and writing a report on it is extremely tiring. Most of the time, Stefan relied on Gabriel for his projects and assignments because he had never taken his studies seriously. And despite not even trying to learn a word, he would still manage to get good grades. You should not worry, Helena will assist you properly, Gabriel responded. Although Stefan was a sloth, he was also a proficient worker, so Gabriel did not have to worry about his made-up grievances. Anyways, let's go and eat something. I am starving to death. With a quick pat on Gabriel's shoulder, Stefan and Gabriel left the classroom and made their way straight to the cafeteria. Gabriel looked around the room, but he could not find Evelyn anywhere. He sighed and took the seat. Evelyn would often tag them along for lunch and would never stop talking about her day, just to seize his attention. Gabriel hardly responded to any of her words, however, he was attentive to what she said. Why isn't Evelyn here yet? Have you seen her? Stefan, who was equally surprised by her absence, inquired of Gabriel instead. I will give her a call instead, Stefan stated as he took out his phone. The ring went twice and Evelyn answered his call. Eve, where are you? He asked. Brother Stefan, I won't be able to join you. Evelyn's painful voice made Stefan furrow and he inquired. Eve, are you all right? Why do you sound like you are in pain? Stefan's words caught Gabriel's attention and he furrowed in concern. Meanwhile, Evelyn was inside the restroom. Sadly, she had her period, and to make matters worse, she had forgotten to bring one sanitary pad. Unable to leave the room, she decided to wait for assistance, but she found it difficult to wait long because of her worsening cramp. Evelyn was going to call one of her female professors for assistance when she unexpectedly received a call from Stefan. Trying to sound as normal as she can, Stefan ended up catching her lies, causing her to spill the truth to him. Evelyn stood by the wall, trying to bear the pain, but her knees gave up quickly and she scrunched up a little. Just as she was ready to give up, someone sprang into the restroom, making her shudder in terror. Gabriel? Evelyn mumbled, realizing that someone was no one else but Gabriel. Grab this now and head straight to the cubicle. Gabriel rushed to Evelyn, handed her a bag, and dashed out of the girls' restroom like a gust of wind. 2. It took Evelyn a moment to realize what had happened, but as she looked down at the bag she was holding, she saw that it contained some sanitary pads. It caught her off guard to see Gabriel worried about her, but she brushed it off quickly and went into one of the cubicles to get things done. Stefan, meanwhile, was staring at Gabriel wide-eyed outside the girls' restroom. He was astounded by what he saw because it all transpired in a matter of seconds, leaving him with confused thoughts regarding the entire situation. How did you accomplish that? He inquired, still attempting to make sense of everything that had happened and how quickly Gabriel gave Evelyn the bag and stormed back. Stop talking, Gabriel yelled, ignoring his shocked expression as he peered around. Though he was relieved that no one saw him enter the girls' restroom, he was still surprised to see himself acting boldly.